Welcome to the Parenting on the Spectrum show with board-certified behavior analyst and infant-toddler development specialist, Teresa Alexander Inman. Parenting on the Spectrum dives into real stories, challenges, and triumphs, offering invaluable insights and support for families on your unique journey. Let's get into the episode.
Welcome, welcome. I am so thrilled to have with us today Dr. Kashif Khan. He is the founder of a genetic research company and the author of The DNA Way. He has done research with Autism Speaks and the Autism Hope Alliance, and I would like to welcome him so we can talk about the research that has to do with autism and the causes of autism. Welcome, Dr. Khan.
Pleasure. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to have you here.
Yeah, it's awesome. Can't wait to dive in. What you're doing, by the way, is amazing. You know, educating the world and teaching everybody, because you don't have to do it, but you're putting in the time and effort, and I think I commend you for that.
Thank you. And you know what, I guess, same for you with the research that you're doing. It's a work of your heart, right? Not so much, I heard you, like I told you before, I've heard you speak before, and everything that I've heard from you is like, it's not about the money. It's about helping people. It's about changing lives. And that, if it's not about that, then why are we here, right?
Yeah. We've built a lot of successful enterprises around the science, but my role, I always build it, and then I end up in this like advocacy role because, the business part is great, but when you actually hands-on are dealing with people and see the stories and see the outcomes, and that's purpose. And, there's nothing greater than working for purpose.
Exactly. That's the fuel to get everything started.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, question for you. Now, how did you get into this field? I know you're a serial entrepreneur, and of all things, you're doing this and, autism research and all of that. How did that fall into your heart?
Completely unintended. And I wasn't even aware that there was a problem to solve. And like many people who haven't been touched by autism or any other condition for that matter, never really had to understand the nuances or anything more than the surface level you see in a movie, for example, right? So I actually got sick. So I was in my late 30s. I'm now 45, and eczema all over my face. I literally couldn't open up my eye. It was sealed shut from inflammation, psoriasis everywhere, migraines, gut issues, depression. And I had never been sick before, and in that journey, I started going to doctors, and the kind of questions I were asking weren't really aligned to the way things were done. There's this toolkit of diagnose and prescribe. Here's what it's called, and here's the pill. And my questions were like, what did I do wrong? What did I eat? What did I breathe? Because I've never been sick, and all of a sudden there's 5 or 6 things going on. That's not serendipity. That's not a coincidence. Something happened. Something changed, right? And so I was forced to figure it out on my own. So from traditional Chinese medicine to homeopathy to naturopathy to functional medicine to then eventually genetics. And I started taking courses and learning about that stuff. And I eventually hired a team. This is while I was still running my old business around technology and I wasn't going to my office anymore. I was sitting at my dining room table just working on this. And my partner was like, where are you? I said, I think I found something more important than the business we run. And I healed myself. And I not only healed myself, but I got my arthritic mother out of bed, and she now goes to a gym and she trains, and where she was bedridden before. I got my friends off of cholesterol pills, and I got, my anxiety-induced niece who couldn't go to school, now thriving, going to university, and it all changed. And if I were to sum it all up, I learned that there's a bio-individual nature for each one of us. We all have a unique genetic code. And that genetic code allows us to do really well with certain choices and really poorly with other choices. And it's not the same for all of us. And that's why you constantly have these debates over, does this cause that? Does that cause this? Is this good for this? Because it's not the same answer for everyone. And that's when I built this research company. And since then, we've helped tens of thousands of people and spent a lot of time in the autism space.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to jump right into the autism part of it. What have you found with autism, though? Because there's so much out there, so much controversy about the cause, and, it's the mom's fault, the dad's fault. It's what they did. It's what they ate, what they took, the vaccines. It's all the things. Like, is there an answer?
So the confusion comes from, first of all, believing that it's all the same thing, right? And so if you're only trying to solve one problem, then there should only be one answer.
Right.
But if you have 50 problems that fit in a bucket, then you have 50 different answers. And you also have 50 different causes. So there is a very real thing called autism, that some children at birth have an innate genetic condition, and there's no answer for that right now. There will be. There's genetic therapeutics that are coming that will be able to edit genes, determine which gene it is. And this is the work that I did at Sick Kids Hospital, where we partnered with them in sort of trying to identify where those genes are. And when I saw that, I was like, there's looking for this needle in the haystack, and they have spent millions of dollars. And I asked them, okay, you spent so far $8 billion trying to find this answer. How many kids' lives have you changed so far? And the answer was 0.
Oh, man.
I said, I understand that one day you're going to find this magic switch that turns things on or off. But to me, it seems like that's a tiny fraction of the kids that we're actually dealing with. The vast majority weren't born with something. There was no particular sign, symptom, and then all of a sudden things changed.
Yes.
Right? And that's why you have this debate over vaccines and environmental factors and etc. And so I started to study the bio-individual answer to that. And what I learned there are genetic pathways that deal with detoxification, that deal with heavy metal removal, that deal with neurology and neural development. And all kids are not wired the same way. And that's why there's this confusion over, does this cause this and this cause that? Because it's not the same answer for everyone. So I can get deeper into the bio-individuals and how certain pathways, this is the risk, and then you can predict. You can predict that this child is wired like this, remove this, add this, and they should be okay.
Interesting. Yeah, because I remember while you were talking, it just brought to mind a training that I attended where they talked about the possible cause of autism was synaptic pruning or lack of synaptic pruning that happens at 3, which is why a lot of children have symptoms at 3. Is there any value to that?
There's very real hardware issues, right? Let's call it that. And then there's very real software issues, where even that two child have the same outcome but different. Sorry, same biological makeup but two different outcomes.
Yes.
So it's not one single thing; it's a combination. So suppose a child, that's what goes on, hardware failure. Let's call it that. Meanwhile, they have their glutathione genetics, their ability to deal with heavy metals, toxins, etc. Amazing. Their ability to methylate and convert things to make them water soluble is amazing. Their mitochondrial function and cellular energy is incredible. So they have great resilience against inflammation, and they don't get inflamed. And they have great brain-derived neurotropic factor genetics. So they do a good job of driving new neurons in the brain. At that age of 3, that kid didn't have an issue. Now, another kid with that same hardware wiring that has poor glutathione genetics, that happens to live near agriculture, that is breathing in pesticides, that same kid who has poor mitochondrial genetics, that happen to get a viral infection that they just can't recover from because they don't have enough cellular energy, that happen to have poor neural development because of certain ingredients like BDNF and dopamine, for example, and certain receptors that are needed, genetically suboptimal. The same exact context, the pruning, for one kid was an issue and one kid wasn't.
Wow,
Right?
that is fascinating.
This
Yeah.
is why everything is a debate. Everything is a debate in the autism world. Everything, this causes this, no, it doesn't. But why didn't this kid have it? Right? Because it's not one single thing. It's the total picture. And what we have to move away from is, what's the answer? It's opposed to, what's this child's answer?
Yes, yes. Because too, we see that with twins, right? There'd be one twin who's not autistic and the other one who is. And I've worked with several families and heard of several people where that's the case.
Yep. And even the thing you brought up about vaccinations, we were forced to look into that, right? And there's some people that I talk to that as soon as I bring up the word, don't even want to talk anymore. They're like, well, if you're going to go there, we're not going to have a conversation. And then I would say, with something as profound and important as trying to solve this problem, why aren't you willing to have every conversation? Right?
Exactly.
Even if it turns out that there's nothing to be discovered there, at least we checked. Right? So what is the answer? I don't believe that the drugs or vaccines cause any neurodevelopment issue, right? Or that create a change in the child. But the parents will also say, that's when my kid changed. Right? So they're both right. The studies around these molecules and drugs, etc., they're all clear and clean. parents will say completely different child a few days after, right? So what happens? We know that, and there's no hiding this, that most of these jabs have aluminum, metals, mercuries, etc. in them, and they have a purpose. They're meant to trigger an immune response, and they're meant to make that tool work well, right? So there's a real reason for that. And when you test theoretically in biology as per a human being, it seems okay. The trace amounts, etc., seem fine. Then you start to look at, well, there are very specific pathways. For example, the glutathione pathway. Glutathione is this master antioxidant the body uses to neutralize and remove toxins.
Mm-hmm.
And we learned that genetically, there's a phenomenon called a copy number variation, which means it's not about what version or variant. There's certain genes that people are missing. They don't even have. So imagine your DNA is this human instruction manual, this book that all your cells read to know how to do their jobs, and there's a page torn out. So if the page is torn out, that instruction doesn't exist. It's not about how good or how bad, it just isn't happening. So imagine this key instruction of antioxidant glutathione removal, toxin removal in your blood. There's a gene called GSTT1 that's responsible for that. And this gene happens to be one of the few where it's possible to have a copy number variation where you're missing it. Now that child takes that same medication with the aluminum and the mercury, etc., lacking the ability to clear it. So it's right. Some other child, no problem. And this is why when you study it, in average, things are okay. Now you start to accumulate, starts to cause neural inflammation, right? Starts to change the behavior, and then the child gets a fever, and the parent will call the doctor and say, wow, my child's reacting, they have a fever. They say, no problem, very common, give them some Tylenol.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The active molecule in Tylenol is acetaminophen. That's the drug. Acetaminophen requires your glutathione genes and pathway in order to be processed. The exact same pathway the body's relying on to get the metals out, which wasn't working to begin with because that gene is missing.
Mm-hmm.
And now you overwhelm it with the acetaminophen and you literally get locked in this neural inflammatory state and the metals never leave. And we know there's no science that disagrees that metals cause inflammation. There's no science that disagrees that metals are not good for your neurology. The gray area is not, again, being by individual and looking at the 20 kids that did well, but the one who wasn't wired to tolerate those choices, right? And that's all we should care about is what is that kid's story and not average things out.
Yeah, that is so important because, when we start lumping everybody together, it causes problems because everybody's so different in every way. Even like we were talking about twins earlier, there's still differences among them.
Yeah. And this is where even you can name any system in the body from metabolism to hormone generation to neurochemical development. If I have somebody's DNA, I can describe their personality to a T. I've never spoken one word to them because neurochemicals don't lie. They create your perception. How do you seek reward? What motivates you? Do you binge? Are you an addict? Do you have anxiety? These are all predetermined. The genes that drive them are also predetermined. And so you could have a set of twins, one of whom, because they got genes from mom and dad, it's a combination. It's a bit of a Russian roulette there. So one, just the stress alone of dealing with the challenges could cause that child to crash and burn, where another one is actually designed as more of a warrior that is meant to fight through stress and may actually take on more than they can handle. And both of those are bad. Anxiety, burnout, right? So, and now even if you just take this one thing, your neurochemical map, and you don't also consider that in this child's unique perception, then there's one piece off the table that you didn't address. Then their metabolism, then their hormones. Then, my child is a vegan. Okay, do they actually make the enzymes to break down plant proteins? Genetically predeterminable. My child went carnivore. Do they actually process fats and not spike an insulin response from fats? All genetically predeterminable. So all these choices we make, why do we go through so much trial and error? Why do some people have incredible successes and some get stuck for years trying? Because we're solving the wrong problems with the wrong tools, and we do have the ability to solve the right problem just by investigating the unique wiring of each child.
That is so fascinating. And, it just keeps ringing in my head what you said about the metals that are in these vaccines for a purpose. So what I'm thinking, then they're there, but then our bodies, well, the goal is for the body to rid itself of that, right? To flush that out, but it doesn't happen in every case.
That's where the science is a little flawed, because the body does have innate detox systems, right? And a little bit is okay. You're exposed to metals, and when you eat spinach or kale, it comes from the ground, right? So, and you would think that, okay, the body knows how to get rid of it, but the truth is, some kids don't. And this is why you have this. You'll never have the end of the debate if we start to treat every kid as the same. We're not all the same.
Right. Now, so I want to find out genetically, what I'm predisposed to and what I can do for me. Well, can I just go onto 23andMe and do that?
So the nature of what we're talking about here today is not genetics. It's a science we call functional genomics.
Mm.
So genetics is kind of like if you go to your doctor, that's medicine, allopathic medicine. And medicine is diagnose and prescribe. Here's what your disease is called. Here's the pill you take. Functional medicine is trying to figure out, why did you get sick? You weren't born with this condition. Something changed. What was it? Right? Just the same, genetics is you have an 80% chance of breast cancer. You have an 80% chance of Alzheimer's. You have an 80% chance of ALS. Good luck. Right? And
Yeah.
that's all enough. But functional genomics is, we see this priority around Alzheimer's. Now let's go look at which detox pathways, hormone pathways, etc., might lead to the brain inflammation, for which this Alzheimer's gene isn't doing a good job of protecting you, but something has to cause the inflammation first. So it's like priority. Genetics is priority. Here's what's not working. Functional genomics is, let's look at the main systems that actually take you from I was born fine to I have some level of inflammation. None of this stuff is possible without inflammation. So those main pathways are everything around your cortisol levels and how you perceive the world, so stress, anxiety, and trauma. This is why children that grow up in homes of trauma have an 8 to 14 times elevated risk of chronic disease, depending which disease, cancers, cardiovascular, they're different numbers. It's not because the trauma causes the disease. It causes the bodies to stay in a state called fight or flight where it doesn't recover. Right? It's all focused on war, battle, that your body thinks you're in battle. So it changes the immune system down, gut function down, nervous system engaged, not a recovery state. So that's one. Second is your metabolic health. So what are you eating, and what are you actually genetically designed to eat? Some of it is obvious, some of it isn't. For example, I did some work with the U.S. female Olympic team, and one of the questions was, why with the same food, same training, same diet, do they have different outcomes? And I said, the answer is in your question. They're not the same person. How do you expect the same outcome? And so some of them, so the entire team was on this low carb diet. Some of these young women were genetically wired to thrive off of carbs, counterintuitive to today's health and wellness culture, right? And so when we brought the carbs back in, they went from failing to ranking on the podium. Wow. And it was literally one tweak. So metabolic. Number 3 is environmental health. What are you touching? What are you breathing? What's on your clothing? What are you cleaning your home with? Like, all these considerations are the things that eventually enter your body that may eventually cause inflammation, because the overwhelming total dose is too much. So you might pick up an air freshener and say, no big deal. You might pick up a laundry detergent and say, no big deal. But when you consider the total accumulative load of everything that's in your home, there's a study that just came out of Belgium that said that indoor air quality of North American homes is 5 times worse than outdoor pollution, right? So it's not because of one thing, it's because of all of it in the drywall box that doesn't breathe. So environmental is number 3. Number 4 is gut. And when I say gut, I mean there's genetics around some of us don't have the best gut function. There's genetics around some of us not maintaining our microbiome diversity. There's genetics around the actual physical hardware of the gut, and some people being more prone to like leaky gut and Crohn's and IBS. So, and some people have gut genetics that are a little too good, like literally too good, that leads to things like autoimmunity. So that's the 4th pillar of where your body would be in a state that it can't repair. And the 5th pillar is your hormones. And this doesn't get asked much because in a state of youth, people don't think about hormones. Hormones is like we think of it as a sex hormone, which is true, reproductive hormones, but it's also body type. It's also hair and skin. It's also bone structure. It's also muscle mass. Hormones do a lot more than just drive your reproductive activity. And I can tell you that there are hormones that are good and beneficial, and there are metabolites of the hormones that in themselves cause inflammation. So you might be doing everything right, but making something on the inside. And this is why we see a lot more autism in boys than girls, because testosterone, if I were to take hormones as an example, is an anti-inflammatory inhibitor. So testosterone prevents your body from fighting inflammation well. It's a warrior gene, right? So, warrior hormone. Anyways, those are the 5 big pillars. You usually find inflammatory insults within these, and we are all wired differently in our body's ability to deal with all these. It's kind of like digging in and seeing where's the broken biology and prioritizing that.
That is so fascinating. Oh my gosh. I'm thinking though, how about, so they're autistic children, I'm thinking of this one young man in particular. He is 17. He's non with, what do you call it, seizures and all kinds of things. And he just has a lot of issues. If he were to be tested through your company, would there be a way to help him?
So we're literally very similar case. We're working with a 17-year-old girl right now who nonverbal, right? She has, like, her mom is a health and wellness influencer who has done everything, right? And now, funny thing is, her mom has tinnitus and can't get rid of it. So I showed them based on their genetics. A lot of people here are probably familiar with the term methylation, right? Genetically, we look at a gene called MTHFR, which is the known thing, but there's so much more to methylation than just MTHFR. And if you park that for a second and think of a MTHFR as this link in the chain, you have to understand the entire chain to know how strong the chain is. Every link counts, right? So in her case, there's this really subtle nuance where her ancestors likely ate more lamb, sheep, goat versus beef. The way she absorbs and assimilates B12 is sublingually under her tongue versus in her stomach. Now, she was on this sort of carnivore diet where she was getting what she thought was enough B12. And by the way, her blood work showed high B12. She thought she was overdosing because of her carnivore diet. The truth is, she didn't have the genetic ability to use that form, which is called methylcobalamin, and instead she needed what's called an adenocobalamin. It was a very different form based on her ancestral eating habits. And so we started to dose her with that at the right dose, with a couple other nutrients also. And within 2 weeks, her tinnitus was gone, right? But we showed her this is the exact same broken pathway that is causing, why were you lingering in inflammation here? The same reason why your daughter is now lingering in inflammation neurologically. So we started to work on that. And it's been a few weeks, and all of a sudden, I literally just talked to her yesterday, and she said, like, "What? This is really working. I actually see the difference in her behavior. What should we do now?" It just literally yesterday was our catch-up call, right? One subtle nuance, one single pathway, one single nutrient that from her food she wasn't getting, which most people would think it does come from that food, which is true, but the form she needed was unique. You tweak the form, and all of a sudden, changes everything.
Wow, that is so fascinating. I mean, I have goosebumps. I'm calling everybody. This is so vital. My sister and I took a similar test years ago, and basically it's like, no, stay away from this. Like I was to stay away from, grains, because in my body, they turn to bad cholesterol. In my sister's body, they turn into sugar, and, just all these different things. I don't think it was as intense as yours, which I'm really going to look into now. However, it just showed us the vast differences between people, and the fact that everybody doesn't need every vitamin, because it's like, actually I needed vitamin D, no, B, sorry, because she said my body just got rid of it, it didn't hold it. So I was prescribed vitamin B, and we talked about my detox pathways, which some were great and some were average, and she said you don't want to be average. So I totally get it. So how can people access your information? How can they learn? How can they get the testing? What can they do?
On my end, it's funny because I built this business and I don't run it anymore because my time, I think, is best spent in advocacy and teaching, right? That's what I do. I have a 3-hour webinar tonight just to teach people about all sorts of, in fact, it's around women's health, hormone health, right? So what I've done is I've gone to Instagram and I speak there daily about what people need to know. And I would say if people start there just to learn about the reality of all these debates. Is this safe? Is that not safe? Do I need this? Do I not need that? There is truth to all of those questions. And so if you go to my Instagram, which we can share later, it's CashCon Official, you'll see a ton of amazing information about what's really making us sick and what we really need to be healthy. If you go there, you'll see a link to register for a webinar where we host regularly, once every, at least a couple times a month, where you can come live and actually ask me questions, right? You can come live and bring up, here's what's going on with my child, here's where they're at, here's what I've tried, what else, what do you think, right? And then I might guide you and say that functional genomics is exactly what you need, or I would say that no, this is more of a genetic condition, and I would refer you out to this person and put you on a waiting list for this therapy that's coming along the way. So I would say just, I'm here to help. So just show up. I'll be there. I'm usually on for hours just talking to people, answering questions. So do that. Go to Instagram, go to my handle, learn. There's a ton of great content there, but also register for the webinar in my sort of bio. You'll see it there, and then come talk. And then when you might decide that testing is good, or I don't need testing, or maybe I might determine this sounds more like a mold issue. Let's bypass the DNA and go straight to mycotoxin testing. We'll figure it out on that call.
Wow. Awesome, Cash. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Wow. I'm just so thrilled. I'm so glad that Jesse reached out and that we're here. And I just thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your heart with us. And to our audience, thank you so much for watching. Please, KashCon Official, right?
Yes.
On Instagram. So go there, learn, talk to him, find out all you can. Because I know this is 26 minutes and, there's not much, but I think we shared a ton that, giving people a place to start. So thank you again for watching and see you next time.